Hello and welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be looking at topics under the Study Island lesson, Quadratic Equations in Algebra 2, and that also covers the standard 2.3a and 2.6a in Algebra 2. So what I've done is I've just gone through and pulled out questions from the Study Island topic that you can do straight on the TI-84 Plus calculator. And this is the calculator you're given on the screen on your EOI. So as you're going through today's lesson, if you could take some notes, write down the steps, write down the order of the buttons that I'm pushing, and that way you have that in your notes to look back at. And if I go too fast or you miss something, just pause and rewind so you can get caught back up. There's no harm in that. And so let's go ahead and look at the first question. In order to do that first question, we're going to need to know a little bit about solving quadratic equations by graphing. So a quadratic equation is an equation with the highest exponent is an x squared on the variable, and the graph is this U shape called a parabola. It can be a smile or it can be upside down and be a frown. And so where you're looking for a solution of any graph is going to be the x-intercepts. And so we are going to be asking the calculator to calculate the x-intercepts in order to find the solutions to these graphs and equations. The big thing is you have to remember that the first step is to set it equal to 0. So that might be the only piece of paperwork that you have to do with actually using a pen and pencil. So here's my first equation. It's already equal to 0, so I don't have to do any solving. So I can go and turn my calculator on and press y equals. And I'm going to clear out anything that might be there. And at the y1, I'm just going to type in x squared plus 25x plus 114. The x button is right here beside alpha. You'll see the x at the beginning. I press it once to get x. And then squared plus 25x plus 114. And then I'm going to press zoom standard just in case I've messed with the window at all, and that way I know that the x and y axis are going from -10 to +10. And so here I only see one place where the parabola is touching the graph. So that means I'm going to have to go out a little bit further. And if I look at my answers, I can see I need to be able to have 6 and 19 on the x-axis, both negative and positive of that. So I'm going to press window, and I'm going to make my x-axis go from -20 to +20 so that I can see everywhere that it crosses. And so right away I can see that the parabola crosses at two negative x-intercepts. And so right away I can see the only answer that has two negative numbers is A. And so I'm thinking that's going to be my answer. And so this is how you can get the calculator to calculate that for sure, though. And so you want to calculate something, so you're going to use calc. And since it's in blue above a button, I have to press second calc. And I want to calculate a 0. A 0 is another name for an x-intercept. So I'm going to press 2. And so the first question is, it's going to ask for the left bound. So using my right and left arrows, I'm going to move them until this blinking spider shows up on the screen. And so left means I want to move it so that it's left of the x-intercept. So that's going to be down here, because this is the left side. And I press enter, and then it asks for the right bound. And so I'm going to move that until it's on the right side of the x-intercept, which would be about here, and I press enter. And I know that I did it right because there's now two arrows at the top of the screen pointing inward at each other. If they were pointing outward, I wouldn't have done it right. And now it says to guess, and so I'm going to move it as close to the x-intercept as I can, which is right there, and press enter. And there it tells me that the 0, or x-intercept, is -6. So far so good with A. And then to get the other x-intercept, I would do the same thing. So I'm going to press second calc, calculating a 0, and I'm going to move it to the left of the second x-intercept. So I might have to press it for a little bit, and there it shows up again. And so now it's on the left of the x-intercept, so I press enter, move it to the right, press enter, move it as close as I can to the x-intercept and press enter, and there it is at -19. So A does check out to be 100% right. This next question is very similar, only now I might have some decimal answers instead of having whole numbers. So I start off by putting my equation into y1. It's already set equal to 0, so I don't have to do any work there. And I'm going to press zoom standard because I had messed with the window and I want to know what I'm looking at. And so here I can see it crosses at two positive numbers. And so I have A and C that has two positive answers. And so I'm going to go through the same steps to see what it calculates the answers at. So I'm going to do second calc, and I'm calculating a 0, so I'm going to press 2. And I'm going to move my right arrows until I see the, or right or left, until I see the blinking spider. And I'm going to put it on the left of the x-intercept, so I press enter. And then I move it to the right. And I press enter, and the arrows are both pointed in, so that's a good sign. And then I move it to guess as close as I can. And here it's positive 5.26799497. So that's a big long decimal. So I'm going to think that that is one of these numbers here. To know that for sure, I can go to the home screen and type 7 plus second square root of 3 and press enter. And it gives me a decimal. That was 8 point something, so that wasn't right. So maybe the minus square root of 3 is right. So 7 minus second square root of 3. I press enter, and then there's that same decimal. So this is going to be one of my zeros, this 7 square root of 3, because in its decimal form, it matches what I calculated the 0 of. So hopefully when I find my other 0, it's going to be that 8.73205. And so I go back to my graph, and I want to calculate that 0, so I press second calc 0, and I'm going to go to the left of that x-axis, or x-intercept, and press enter, and go to the right, and press enter, and then go back and try to get it as close to the x-intercept as possible. And there it is. There's that big long decimal that matched what I calculated 7 plus the square root of 3 to be. And so since their decimal forms are equivalent, A is going to be my final answer. So this equation here, or problem, is asking you to solve the equation by using the quadratic formula. And so you can choose to solve it that way if you want to, but if you want to check yourself using the graphing calculator, you can do that too. You don't necessarily have to solve it using what the instructions say on an EOI. And so the first step is going to be to set this equal to 0 so that I can put it into my graphing calculator. So I'm just going to add 4x squared to both sides. And when I do that, this cancels, and I can't combine that with anything. So it's just going to stay 14x plus 12 plus 4x squared equal to 0. And so I can go ahead and put this equation into my y equals. So I'm going to go to y equals and type 14x plus 12 plus 4x squared. And so now I'm going to go ahead and do zoom standard so I get that window that I know what I'm looking at. And they went ahead and I see where it crosses the x-axis. I see it's going to be two negative numbers. So that could be any of my choices except D because it doesn't cross at 0. And so I'm going to go ahead and see what happens when I try to calculate it. So I'm going to press second calc, and I'm calculating a 0, so I do choice 2. And then I'm going to move my little Spider-Man to the left of my first x-intercept and press enter. And then I'm going to move it to the right and press enter, and then I'm going to get as close as I can to that first one and press enter. And it's saying here at the bottom of the screen, -2 is going to be one of my solutions. So that means it could be B or C. So I just need to calculate the other one. So I'm going to do second calc again, choice 2, and I'm going to move the spider to the left of the intercept, press enter, move it to the right, press enter, move it as close as I can to the actual intercept and press enter. And here it tells me that my other answer is going to be -1.5. So the answer that has -1.5 and -2 is going to be choice B. This next question is very similar. You're going to want to use the calculator to either check your answers or to solve it using the graphing calculator instead of doing the quadratic formula. But first I'm going to have to make sure that it's equal to 0. So over here I've just rewritten the equation, and I'm just going to add 3 to both sides in order to get it equal to 0, because these 3's will cancel and leave it equal to 0. And then on the left side here, this is all in parentheses, so I can't combine the 3 with it. So it just gets tacked on to the end, like so. And I can just enter that equation in there as it is, instead of having to work out the parentheses and everything else like you would for the quadratic formula. So you just have to switch the sign and switch the number over to the other side, and you're set to go. So I'm going to go into my y equals and clear out my old equation and type in this new one. X parenthesis -4x minus 11 n parenthesis plus 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and graph that. And I see my parabola. And so I can see that it looks like it's crossing, it looks a positive number and a negative number, although that one's kind of close, it's hard to see for sure. And so I can look for something that would be equivalent to a positive and negative number. So that just helps me out, but I'm going to go ahead and actually have the calculator calculate them. So I'm going to press second calc 0, choice 2, and I'm going to use my right arrow and left arrows to move it to that little blinking spider is to the left of the first x-intercept and press enter, and then move it to the right of the x-intercept and press enter, and then move it to its right over top as close as I can get and press enter. And that first x-intercept is -3. I don't have any -3's here, but I have some fractions that might be equivalent to -3, and so I can always use the calculator to check that too. But first, let's go ahead and calculate this second x-intercept to see if that helps. So I'm going to do second calc choice 2 for 0, move this to the left of the y, or the x-intercept, excuse me, press enter, move it to the right, press enter, and then move it as close as I can and press enter. And there it's telling me that the x-intercept is also a 0.25 or a quarter. And so I don't see that over here either. So what I can do is, if you're not positive if these fractions reduce to any of these numbers, is I can go back to the home screen, so second quit, clear out what I see, and then just go ahead and do, okay, what is -24 divided by 8? So -24 divided by 8 is -3. So that first one checked out. And then here, what is -2 divided by -8? That's positive 0.25. So the first one I tried checked out. So my final answer here is going to be A. This last question asks, if you have an equation and you rewrite it, which one of these choices would it be? So anytime you're looking at an equation rewritten and you're just trying to find which one's equivalent, you can see if they make the same graph. So I'm going to put the equation they give us in the first answer choice and try that to see if it's the same graph. So I've already put those into y1 and y2. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to change y2 to a thicker line by using my arrows to bring the cursor on top of the line in front of y2 and press enter. And then I press graph. There's the first one. And then there's the second graph right over top of the first graph, so that means A is going to be my final answer. If it had been an incorrect answer, I would see two totally different parabolas on the screen. Thank you for